Hey everybody, Edo here, and for this League video, I'm going to give indie lessons from Mind Control Software. I started at Mind Control Software out of Atari. I went from QA lead / supervisor on duty type role at Atari to associate producer at Mind Control Software. Important note, the person who pulled my resume out of the stack went to the University of Michigan and hadn't played Wolverine Soft, not Wolverine Soft, Crisis Wolverine Insurrection Green, but saw it on my resume, played it, and then decided we have to bring this guy in. And that just speaks to the random way certain things you do in college and when you go out and do indie stuff, it can help you. But so anyway, I start at Mind Control Software, an associate producer, and the first thing I learned, this is just some anecdotes, but the first thing I learned is I sit down and Andrew Leaker, who runs Mind Control Software, who ran it, says, okay, so you're on Field Commander. This was a PSP game with Sony. We're doing some design and engineering support and a variety of working with Sony, and we need you to design levels. And I was sort of like single player and multiplayer levels. And I was sort of like, I'm a producer. He's like, yeah, associate producer's going to do all this, right? And I was like, isn't that designer, producer, designer, whatever, you're doing the... And like, it was like, I was like, oh, I'm designing games like that. That was it. And then I did a ton of production stuff. But Mind Control Software was an incredible roller coaster ride. It was my first experience with independent game development. I'm not going to go deep on it, but if you're going to do work for hire indie, expect it to be like this. It's stacked against you. You're going to want to make your own stuff, but you're going to have to feed your team, and it's rough. It's a rough road. Maybe that's another video. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that part of it here, but certainly work for hire indie development and starting your own studio on a gig or multiple gigs is hard because you always need more work. You always have to spend time getting it, and design risk and production risk is always on the developer, never on the publisher. So those are things that make it tough. Some companies do it well, but it's tough. Anyway, so but I moved up in Mind Control. I was associate producer, project manager, or program manager, all the way up. Eventually, I became the studio director of the studio. And Andrew Leaker, not only an incredible guy, but my first true, genuine mentor in my life, and learned so much about production, so much about design, so much about business, what to do and what not to do in some regards, but huge part of my career. All right, so, but that's me. Let's talk about things that I learned, and I want to give you 3 nuggets of awesome from my time at Mind Control Software. The first of which has to do with iterative game design. Now, in Mind Control, I also learned about mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics, and Mark and Andrew were big with Robin on that program, and you can read about it, and I did a video about it. But one of the things that I truly learned at Mind Control is this idea of iterative game design and a willingness to find the fun, let the game and the iteration and the process of making something take you to where it's going to end. You don't know what is or isn't going to work, or what is or isn't going to be fun. You need to follow that. You need to sniff it. You need to feel it out. And getting good at developing a process and an approach to that can allow you to expose it quicker. And a lot of what iterative design has to do with is, again, having a plan, having a process, knowing you're going to have a design phase and a pre-production phase and all these steps. You can still have a plan. But once you're in the phase of putting it together, and this is particular to video games, but when you have complex, emergent, cross-department, when you're working with artists and engineers, everyone's adding, and it's this volatile mix of awesome. And sometimes it sparks in different places. And I think more than anything, the lesson is don't have an ego. The designer isn't always right. The producer isn't always right. The engineer isn't always right. The artist isn't always right. You don't always have to be the vision holder. You can let everyone else have a shot, engage, drive. And it took me a long time to learn this and to believe it and flow with it. But so, again, first, good ideas come from everyone, and your game can grow and change by letting other people have a voice and listening and hearing it and not getting so caught up in like, that's how I was supposed to be, that's what I want it to be. So have an open mind. First part of being iterative, have an open mind. Okay? So the next thing is when you're iterating on a design, and again, I'm not trying to use big complicated things here, but say I want to have a game, a puzzle game where I'm slotting, it's a puzzle game and it's going to be Bejeweled or whatever, but where I want to have puzzle elements where you're mixing and matching colors in rows, and you're drawing lines through it on a mobile device. So like you're trying to like create links through lots of colors, and you might have an idea of where you want to go, but as you build it out, you want to build it out in steps. Much like, for those who are familiar with data-driven design and program management and live ops, you don't want to go yanking and turning every lever you can at the same time. We're going to iterate on the art at the same time as we're iterating, or we're going to do the art at the same time as we're making these 7 changes to the mechanics. We're going to go from a puzzle to an action game, and we're going to go from this thing to that, making all these changes. And then looking at the next snapshot, you might have something that was fun that's no longer fun. You might have something that was fun in one way and it's fun in another, but you won't have a clear idea of what did it. So part of iterative design is incremental changes and paying attention to what was changed and what happens. I mean, you can be really scientific about it. You can say, we did these 3 things. Let's take a moment. What improved, what didn't? So I think a big part of iteration and in design is being willing and able to make small steps, pay attention, look, whether it's testing or play testing or whatever, but get feedback. Now, I learned later, and more, you don't want to iterate too much on single feedback. You want to make sure to get a variety of people playing and engaging your revs, your versions of your software or of your game, so you have a better spectrum. You can end up running down and zigzagging all over the field if you just play once and have somebody give you a comment and play and change it and change it and change it. You want to sort of have a little bit of it's like you need to be willing to change and willing to iterate, but you do still want to have a keel, not keel, that's a keel, right? The bottom of a boat, right? You want to be able to move, but you don't want to be such like a flat bottom boat that you're just, you still need to get to the end of the line. Okay, so open mind, incremental changes with feedback loops, right? With looking at it. And then, as you go, you want to start crafting that greater vision. And the vision can go, but and this is sort of a nuance but even with iterative design as you're moving around, you still want to have that North Star. You still want to have that idea of the type of thing that you're trying to make, the type of audience you're trying to have. What is it? Who's it for? Some of those basic things to help guide you as you're making changes to see if you're on or off. And in particular, if you're trying to hit a market, or you're trying to hit a certain audience, or you're trying to hit a fan base. I mean, it works in different ways. But having that distant star that you can wave from but know where you're going is a really big deal. And so, I mean, again, that wasn't practical. I mean, that's not like, hey, here's a list of steps. But games are all over the place. But it's critical to have an open mind. It's important to be willing to look at incremental steps and then be willing to make changes. Listen to everyone around you, but at the same time, have a keel and have a destination you're going to. And I think it'll go a long way. I saw this in practice all the time, and it's gone throughout my entire career. And it's fun. If you're a designer, if you never iteratively designed, like you just sort of like say this is what it's going to be. I mean, at the end of the day, you might not think you're doing it, but you probably do it. But sometimes it's fun not to know where you're going. I mean, sometimes it's fun to say, like, hey, I'm just going to start with, like, 4 pieces on the board and see what happens, and then see what happens, and then see what happens. You can design that way. It's also good when you get, a lot of times in work for hire, we were given a brief. I want a game with, tactical warfare strategy game, right? Like, in this genre, in this space, you guys willing to do it, and then you have to come up with a design and make it good. So you're sort of problem solving. It's sort of pragmatic problem solving in a way, but still making sure you shoot the moon. I mean, so that was key learning number 1. And that was really sort of on the design side of the fence. Let me give you a production one. So another thing, so we were at Mind Control, and over the first 6 months or a year, I don't remember how long it was, maybe not quite that much, there was a guy in charge of production, and I don't want to get into names or anything like that, but there were problems. And, everyone working all night and all day and weekends to hit a delivery date on one project, and then finding out, oh, the date for that project wasn't that project, it was this project, so that one you're 2 weeks early and that one you're late on now. Things are going wrong. And back then, when I was young and idealistic, I was pretty vocal in my displeasure, and certainly an instigator and subversive to a degree. But, I was working very hard, trying for everyone to be successful, but also very frustrated. And I was convinced that this situation was never going to trail. They would change, and as things sort of got bad, everyone sort of got, it was getting pretty, it's getting pretty bad. And, I don't know the dynamics and I don't want to get into it, but at some point Andrew, or him, or whatever, decided this guy's got to go, or he wanted to go, or whatever, and he was gone. And I remember being sort of both, I came in, had a company meeting, and I was sort of shocked, and because I wasn't expecting it ever to happen, and I was asking all the same questions. What are we going to do about this? What are we going to do about this? What are we going to do about this? Who knows the dates? And so, Andrew pulled me aside, and Andrew said, "Hey, Ed, guess what?" And I mean, again, back then it was he was like, "I want you to put your money where your mouth is, and your program manager or projects manager or whatever, you are going to be responsible for making sure that we deliver on all this stuff. That's now your job, Ed." And so I guess, it's sort of a promotion, right? And so I thought about it, and I was like, okay, sort of think, immediately my brain's going what do I have to, and I'm like, okay, Andrew, here's what I need. Great, I'm on. I want you to go out and just let everyone know that, I'm in charge now, and they need to sort of listen to me, and we're going to work this out, and then we should be okay. And I don't remember the exact distinct words, but I do distinctly remember the conversation. Andrew sort of looked at me, and he was like, so, yeah, I'm not going to do that. And I don't even think, I might not have even gotten the title at the time. I don't remember. But Andrew's like, I'm not going to go out there and tell everyone you're in charge. I'm not going to go out there and tell them that they should listen to you. And I was like, He's like, what you're going to do is you're going to know all the information, you're going to know all the dates, you're going to make everyone's life easier, and you're going to you're going to lead without relying on some title. You're going to get it done, prove the value of being organized on top of everything and all that, and that is how you're going to get everyone to listen to you and do what you need to do. I'm not going to give it to you with a title. And, I was still young. I was like, I sort of argued him. I was like, no, this would be really much easier if you did this. And he was like, I'm not going to do it. And again, I was young. I was young. 22, 23, or what? I don't remember. But there were lots of way more senior folk in the organization, other designers, all this. And Andrew, and I've been in his role, was very cognizant of all the dynamics, all of the pressure, all of the why is he doing this versus me, and what's the producer going to do, and all that. And he was totally savvy. But I think he also felt that I was the guy for the job and to do the work. And that experience of having to do that, of having to effectively earn everyone's respect in a way, but more importantly, just become the guy that people look to for the answers to questions about what's done, what's due, who's working, what. He was right, and it changed the trajectory of my career and taught me so much. Even now, I think a little while ago I was talking to a guy who works for me now, and he's not in the same position, but he was sort of taking on new responsibility, and he wanted to, and we were talking about stand-ups, and was sort of like, well, am I going to run the stand-ups? And I'm like, don't worry about whether or not you're going to run a stand-up, right? At the end of the day, when the questions come up, you're the guy answering it. It doesn't matter if you kicked off the meeting or you set the meeting invite. All that matters is when people come in to ask a question, they're like, well, I got to ask that guy, because he's the one who knows the answer, right? And so, from a production standpoint, the value inherent in doing a good job, being reliable, making people's lives easier, having rock solid communication, follow through, organization, all of those bedrocks of cross-discipline, complex project development in games, but in board games as well. When you're doing that right, you in many ways are the one holding the wheel or the reins or whatever, because you're keeping the boat together. And so that was an incredible learning experience to me. And it's not necessarily, some of this stuff from these videos is not exactly applicable, but I certainly don't get caught up in what your title is or what your, who put you in charge and how it's going to, worry less about the talk and more about the do. And you'll go a long way. All right, so last one here. I started a little designer one, talked a little bit about production one. The last one, I guess it's a mixture of production, design, and business, perhaps. The business lessons in work for hire indie development I sort of talked about there, but feast or famine, roller coaster, not for the faint of heart. But one of the deepest resonant lessons from my time at Mind Control Software was that we did a lot of stuff. We did a lot of prototypes, we did a lot of pitches, and a lot of them never went anywhere. Some of them went 3 months, some things were canceled. I had a really brutal game where I was producer on it, leading it, and we got canceled at like alpha or something, and it was just devastating for me at the time. But you're working on all these different projects, and I don't know what I was saying to Andrew at the time, and he actually said it to me multiple. This was like a common theme for him, but like, I was like, that work's wasted, or it's gone, or another one down the tubes, or, And Andrew said, Ed, look, I've been doing this since I was 16 or 15 or 14. He did Sky Realms of Jerusalem when he was like a little kid, but, or whatever age he was. It's never wasted. Nothing's ever a wasted effort. Every creative thing you ever do is valuable. It's valuable in the lessons you learned in doing it. It's valuable in the growth, in how you've grown as a person in making it. But just as much, you never know when you're going to reach back. You never know when somebody wants to have an idea and then suddenly that design you did 3 years ago is a perfect fit. You never know when that art you made is valuable or when you can leverage it again. Don't pretend like something that feels wasted now is wasted tomorrow when it comes to creativity and IP. It's timeless. It's the value of making is not, it's what you've made today, but it's also what it took to make it, and it's what it might become. And nothing has been more true more often. There are so many things in my career where something I worked on in the past has come back and been valuable, or I've looked back of it, or I learned from it, or I grew from it, or a lesson. I was, having a problem over here and suddenly I remembered something from some exchange or working with some group or whatever. Like, it all applies, it all adds value, and don't be discouraged when something doesn't work out. Don't be discouraged when your idea gets tossed out. Don't be discouraged when your company goes under. Don't be discouraged when, you lose. Don't be afraid to fail, right? Fail, learn, and you just never know when you can pull that stuff back out and use it again and do something new with it. So, super powerful and important lesson that I've carried with me. So those are 3 big ones. I learned a lot more, but hopefully these are helpful. I know it's always a little weird because they're so intimate, but again, keep making stuff. Subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Most importantly, make and create some great games. Thanks.